Welcome, everyone. This is a special day. We're here at Frank's Landing with Will Frank, and we're here at his family place. And please, thank you for being here, and please feel free to tell us what we need to know to be here.
Thank you very much. Here we are today, October 19th, and we're here at Frank's Landing, right along the beautiful Nisqually River today. We have our silver salmon running right now in the river. Behind us, we have a couple of our elders who are still fishing here on the Nisqually River. This area is very special to me as you know, a Nisqually tribal member, but also a member of the Frank's Landing Indian community. My name is Willie Frank III. I'm the son of Billy Frank Jr. I'm also a Nisqually tribal councilman. A lot of the rich history here needs to be told, needs to be taught, and we got to make sure that people understand, who we are as Native people here in the state of Washington. My father and many others were arrested over 50 times fishing here on the Nisqually River throughout the 1960s and the 1970s. This area here at Frank's Landing was the centerpiece to the fish wars that happened back in the 60s. At the time, the state of Washington felt like our Native people, not just Nisqually people, but our Native people throughout the state of Washington shouldn't have the right to fish on their usual and accustomed grounds. And of course, my father and many others, the way we understand it is we have a treaty with the United States government. The Treaty of Medicine Creek was signed in 1854, and it gave us the right to fish, hunt, and gather on our usual and accustomed grounds. And I was always raised, this is our usual and accustomed grounds here on the Nisqually River. We are not technically on the reservation. We're about 10 miles south of the Nisqually Indian Reservation boundary lines. Our people never knew boundary lines. We didn't have lines that existed to tell us to where we can be and where we can't be. When the fish are running, we get on the river and we catch them. And today it's the same way today. Unfortunately, our salmon runs and our salmon stocks are not coming back to what they used to be. Our salmon are not returning home. We're really in a dire strait right now here on the Nisqually. I fish right here, right behind us here with my brother, and we've fished in this area literally for the last almost 200 years. When you consider my grandfather Willie Frank Sr., who lived to be 104 years old, and my father. And at 82 years old, my father, he was still fishing here on the Nisqually River with us. And seeing him at 82 still want to come down and get in the boat and fish, it meant a lot to me for my outlook of who we are as Native people. We are stewards of the land. We're the protectors of the land. We're not going to do anything that harms our species in the river. We're not going to do anything to kill off our salmon runs. I hear that a lot from outside organizations, from sports fishermen groups, and different commercial fishing groups that are non-tribal. The tribes always seem to end up getting the blame for why there's no salmon in the state of Washington, the Pacific Ocean up here in the Pacific Northwest. And that's completely the opposite of how we are as Native people. We're gonna never do anything to catch the last salmon. And I always tell people, I don't want to be that generation that catches the last salmon. I don't want to be that generation that has to take my kids someday to a museum to hold a stuffed salmon or to see a stuffed salmon on the wall. We can't survive off making money off of fishing anymore as Native people either. So, for us, it's more or less of being able to get that net in the water and exercise our treaty rights. I was always taught that if you're not exercising your treaty rights, they're going to keep trying to take them away. And we continue to battle over the years here in 2020. It's tough out there when you think about it. You're taking away something that has been near and dear to our heart for thousands of years, being able to fish here on this spot. I don't think people understand that. I don't think people understand how the salmon ties into us as Native people and as Nisqually people. The salmon for us, that is our way of life. And I always compare it to folks when they're talking about how important church is and how important their religion is. Well, for us, being on this river, that's our church. I always tell people on Sundays when the king salmon are running, and we're able to be on here, it feels like that is us going to church on Sundays, my brother and I. It's something we get to share. We get to share that with my dad still. In 2014 he passed away, but here in 2020, for us being on the river is something that we all shared together that was very near and dear to our heart. And so, it's important that people do understand that. I feel like with all the racial tension going on right now in the world, I guess not even the world, I guess I could say the United States, it's important that folks understand who Nisqually is and who our native people are throughout the Pacific Northwest. So the work here on the Nisqually River, it never stops. Here at Frank's Landing, we're always doing what we can as tribal council and as tribal leadership to make sure that we are protecting from the summit to the sea. The river runs 80 miles from the Puget Sound all the way to the base of Mount Rainier. And here on the Nisqually, our goal is always to try to buy up property along the Nisqually River so we can protect it. So we can make sure that there's no big housing developments going in, or there's any kind of infrastructure that's going to be built that's going to affect our salmon runs, affect the habitat, affect the river, the rain runoff. We're trying to look at every possibility, every angle to make sure that we protect this. And the change that we're seeing here on the Nisqually River in the last 20 years, from the lack of our fishing seasons, whether it's our Chinook, our coho, or our chum season, it scares me as a tribal leader, but also more important as a Nisqually tribal member. To be able to teach that next generation about setting your net, the importance of setting your net, and all the things that come into being a fisherman here on the Nisqually River. I think it's important that we make sure that the next generation of people understand how sacred and important this river is to us. And as I said earlier, you talk about always hearing about the Indians catching every last fish and being the ones who are greedy, that's far from the truth. We have 2 hatcheries here on the Nisqually River that produce a great amount of Chinook salmon for not just us as Nisqually, but for other tribes, for sports fishermen, for commercial fishermen that go out into the Puget Sound. And I fully believe that if it wasn't for some of our tribal hatcheries, we wouldn't have any fishing, whether it's state, tribes, commercial, sports, whatever it is. If it wasn't for the work that our tribes do here on the Nisqually, but throughout Western Washington, we would be in a lot of trouble. And so I'm always trying to encourage that next generation to go to school, to become biologists, to become engineers, to be able to come back and give back to this area. I was always taught that we can't do this on our own as Nisqually people. And having my father, Willie Frank III, he was the greatest, I guess you could say, motivator and also team player. He understood that it can't be just the tribes, it can't be just the state, or it can't be just the feds who are making sure that our rivers and our streams are protected. It has to be all of us here in the state of Washington. We're all Washingtonians at the end of the day here. And it's our job to protect this river. It's our job to be the voice of the salmon and everything that lives here. So I would definitely encourage the next generation to find something that you can create and put your whole life into. If you're able to do that and come back, whether you're working up all the way up Lummi by Bellingham or down here at Nisqually, find something that motivates you, that you can come do every day, and give back and protect the resources that we have. This is paradise. My grandfather, he always talked about how Nisqually Indians lived in paradise before the white man came. And I think about that all the time. When we are down here fishing, we are down here exercising our treaty rights. That's when I always realize that I feel the most grounded and always feeling good about things. But then again, when we're not catching any fish to give to our elders, to freeze, to smoke, to be able to distribute out to the community, that's tough. also. So we have a long road ahead of us to make sure that we're protecting the